Good morning, gang. Happy Wednesday morning. As we follow up to another great live stream last night, thank you to all those who participated. As usual, you guys present a boatload of very thought-provoking questions, and there was one last night that pretty much kept me up most of the night. I kept thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. Finally, at about 4:15 this morning, I got up. I'm like, okay, I need to break this down and explain to everybody somewhat of my answer. The question was, how soon until the U.S. economy completely collapses? Now, of course, I can't give you a specific day and time. And the answer I gave yesterday was kind of an abridged version of what I'm going to show you right now. Now, you can tell me, hey, he's a fruitcake. He thinks the economy's doomed, that war's inevitable, yada, yada, yada. I want to show you this specifically with facts. Funny how I do that. Now, there's two things. Well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of slides here that you're going to need to pay attention to. They'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. But there's two underlying causes for the reason that the U.S. economy is doomed and war is inevitable. Okay? Neither of which are Joe Biden. He's assisting and pushing everything forward, but he's not the underlying cause for this one. So the two facts that you need to know. The first one, the Federal Reserve Act, which was passed by Congress in December of 1913, and then the regional Federal Reserve Banks opened for business in November of 1914. Okay, that's the first thing to remember. The second one is from August 15th, 1971, and that was when the U.S. terminated convertibility of the U.S. dollar to gold and basically killing Bretton Woods and making the U.S. dollar a fiat currency, basically a debt instrument and not an asset instrument. Okay? Those are the two things you need to remember. And I want to show you exactly what happened. Okay? So the first graph I want to show you right here. Okay? This is a graph of U.S. price levels going all the way back to 1774. Okay. Now, granted, you had the Revolutionary War in there, a little bit of turmoil. But if you look, the price level was about the same in the 1770s as it was in the 1910s. Okay. Look at that whole graph. It's basically, prices are flatlining all the way across. Okay. I went and dug up the research to this. Okay. And I used flour, wheat, flour, as a basis to go off of. Why? Well, because you can't really go back to the 1770s and figure out the price of an automobile or a men's suit or something, because things have changed. But something that has stayed constant for the last 250 years, okay, has been flour. So I used that as my basis. Okay. So let's go back. In 1785, take a look at this slide here. In 1785, in Massachusetts, a pound of flour cost 3.6 cents in 1785. Fast forward to 1900, 115 years later, the national average price of flour was 12 cents for 5 pounds. Break that out. That's 2.4 cents per pound. Say what you will about the cost of things in Massachusetts that are higher than everything else. Okay, yes, we get that. Okay. That's never changed. Massachusetts is always ridiculously expensive. But let's remember something here real quick. In the 1770s, 1780s, 1785, we didn't even have states yet. Okay, we were still colonies. Okay, I think it was Delaware was 1787 or 1788 was the first state. Okay? Give you this. But over 115 years, without the Federal Reserve, the cost of flour dropped 33%. Regular market conditions took over. That was it. That prices went up, prices went down, depending on nothing more than supply and demand. And you can't tell me that the demand for flour went down because people have eaten bread since the beginning of time, okay? And the population of the United States, let's just say that, okay, whether it's colonies or whatever, the population from 1785 to the population in 1900 certainly increased. So the demand went up. Of course, the supply went up, but the price went down, okay? This was all in a period when we had no Federal Reserve, no artificial manipulation of currency whatsoever, and the currency that we were using was gold and silver, okay? So, let's fast forward a little bit. Like I said earlier, in November of 1914, we have now a Federal Reserve, okay? So let's take a look at the price of flour between 1900, when we had no Federal Reserve, and let's say the 1960s. In the 1960s, now mind you, we're still on the gold standard at this point. Even though FDR has flatlined the price of gold at $35 an ounce, we're on the gold standard. We have a Fed, but gold is still what the U.S. currency is backed by. In the 1960s, flour was 59 cents for 5 pounds, or about 11.8 cents per pound. Okay? So with a Federal Reserve manipulating currency, but still being on the gold standard, flour increased in price 5-fold in just 60 years. We went 115 and it dropped. We brought in a Fed and fold went up 5 times. And flour went up in price 5 times. Okay? So then let's change what happened next. Richard Nixon nixes Bretton Woods. Okay? And the dollar ceases to be backed by gold, and it is now a debt instrument. It is no longer an asset-backed security. Okay? Today, the price of flour at Walmart for Great Value brand, for Walmart's brand flour, not gold medal or anything like this, okay, for generic flour, is 63 cents a pound. Okay? So, if we take this again, with the Fed and with fiat currency, a debt instrument, not gold-backed, okay, flour has increased now more than 5 times in the last 60 years. So think about this. Without the Fed and with gold being the currency, okay, the price of flour dropped by 1/3 in more than a century. But with the Fed and without the currency being backed by gold, flour went from 2.4 cents a pound to 63 cents a pound. That's 2,600% inflation on flour. Overall, if we go back to 1914, when the Federal Reserve was created, inflation in the United States has recently broken 3,000%. Okay? That's the difference, okay, of having man manipulate the economic laws of nature and the incompetence in which it's done. You know, we can talk about some very incompetent ones. Let's take a look at Paul Volcker back in the 70s, okay? Utterly incompetent. You know, we can look at Jerome Powell right now, utterly incompetent. We can look at Janet Yellen, utterly incompetent. Alan Greenspan did a decent job, but at the end, he was starting to screw things up too. Okay. When you start to mess with supply and demand, okay, this is what you get. Look at this chart. Okay. Next one here. Let's just look at inflation since we dropped the gold standard. Okay. Even with the Fed, inflation was relatively muted. Like I said, everything grew flour grew 5 times in the first 60 years. We dropped the gold standard. If you go back to the same place, we've now grown 26 times since we've gone to fiat currency. Why? Well, you can go to the U.S. debt clock and take a look at this real quickly, all right? Right now, the government has taken in, as of right now, $4.6 trillion in revenue so far, between income taxes, payroll taxes, excise taxes, whatever it would be. The U.S. government has taken in $4.6 trillion in debt as of somewhere around 6:30 this morning. Okay, we have paid so far this year $3.8 trillion in interest on the debt in which we have. Okay, so we've taken in 4.6, we've paid 3.8. That leaves a difference, a surplus of about $800 billion. That ain't nothing, okay? As interest rates keep going up, okay, we're going to have to pay more and more and more interest. And I tried to explain the rule of 72 yesterday, how long it takes to double your principal, what you either are saving or what you owe based on interest rate, okay? Take whatever your interest rate is, divide that into 72, and that'll tell you how many years it takes for it to double. Okay. As interest rates keep going up, it costs the government more money, more interest to borrow money. So eventually we get to a point, we only have an $800 billion buffer right now. Eventually we get to the point where the output, the interest payments, are more than the tax revenue. The only solution to that for a government is to raise taxes. They tried something like that in 1773. We went to war.